It's not on. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. All right, in the interest of time, well, thanks. We are going to get going. My name's Allison Agston, and I'm the director of the Center for Climate Journalism and Communication here at USC. We're very proud to co-host. Thank you. I also happen to be a curator at the Wrigley Institute for Environment and Sustainability, so it's a special pleasure to be able to moderate a panel with museum and art folks. So you know who we have in front of us. We have the Wendy Abrams. She is founder of Cool Globes and the 1111 Foundation. We also have Lori Bettison-Varga. She's here in Los Angeles at our own Natural History Museum of LA County, where she's the president. And we have Sean Decatur. You are president and director. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Lori that's president and director. Sean's president of the American Museum of Natural History. So, yes, what a group. Really incredible leaders with us today. So I want to get right into it and talk about the ways educators can collaborate with organizations like yours. I think I'm going to start with you, Sean, and then each of you can kind of go down the row. And by the time we get to you, Wendy, I also want you to explain what Cool Globes is.
So the American Museum of Natural History is I like to think of it as we're a combination of three different types of institutions. We are a public-facing museum that sort of sees about 4.5 million visitors a year, including roughly 300,000 school children who come through on field trips. We're an educational institution with both formal education programs that reach from preschool up through graduate school. We have a PhD program, a master's program in teaching. About half of the middle school earth science teachers in New York State have received their training and credentialing through the American Museum of Natural History. And then we're a science research institution with sort of projects and collaborations that reach around the world. And so I think one of the things that's essential for all of this work is how do we bring these tools to bear to bring that combination of research, education, public engagement to critical problems. And that involves partnership and collaboration with scientists, with educators, and with sort of a wide range of mechanisms for communicating broadly to the public.
So we are all those things except for the American Museum of Natural History has the graduate programs at a higher level. And so we have very similar perspectives on this. I will say that in LA, one of the key aspects of the work that we do is really community facing. And our mission to inspire wonder, discovery, and responsibility for our natural and cultural worlds leads us. But so does one of our primary three pillars of our strategic framework, being museums of, for, and with Los Angeles. And the with Los Angeles is critical to us. And I think the point I would like to make here is that we see our work deeply rooted in community. We see it deeply rooted in work with schools, of course, with teachers, of course. We have a teacher advisory council. We do curriculum by teachers for teachers. We have plenty of opportunity to engage with students that come, tens of thousands of students that come to the Natural History Museum and La Brea Tar Pits. Some of you know that we oversee La Brea Tar Pits as well. And through those kinds of collaborations with schools, we are able to have an extensive reach into the community. We also have 3 mobile museums. We think it's really important for us to be off-site as much as it is to be on-site. And we have a very well-developed community engagement program. We have a community science program. Our staff are in the communities, responsive to community needs, and doing programs that the community wants. And that extends from the schools all the way to community partners. We have 50 robust community partners. We co-curate with them. We co-create experiences in our gardens, our nature gardens across at NHM. We have campouts in the gardens with kids who've never been out camping, and do all sorts of things that really meet the community where they are.
I really want to get to Wendy and Cool Globes, but for educators in the audience who perhaps have not engaged with museums before, could you each tell me in 1 or 2 sentences how they do that?
we have a website with all that contact information available. nhm.org is a great place to go to start that conversation.
Yeah, and we, I would also say at AMNH, there's a website that we have. It's Ology, OLOGY, that is connected into the AMNH website. It's where our educators work with educators around the country in developing curricular materials, home learning materials for students on a range of science topics, including a section of the Ology site that's dedicated to climate education.
Thank you. Wendy, tell us about Cool Globes.
So Cool Globes is a public art exhibition that I conceived the idea in 2005, so it's been 20 years. And the idea was, how do I reach people who aren't going into museums, although our first partner was the Field Museum in Chicago in this middle picture, and then we went on to tour and partnered with museums around the world. But the idea was, how do I reach the people who aren't self-selecting to educate themselves? There is a 5-foot diameter globe on the sidewalk, and you're like, what's that? My original goal was to use the words global warming and fun in the same sentence, which was rather hard to do, but I think we accomplished it. We also are very focused on solutions. So I think a lot of what the conversations with the governor and also I could have said verbatim what Laura said about being motivated by my children and that having that aha moment that this isn't somebody else's problem, this is ours and everybody needs to be part of it. That was my story too. I'm just older and my children were born in 1999, so I had that epiphany a little before Laura, but it was a public art exhibition, and each globe showcased a solution to climate change. It was also a reason, at the time I thought we were only going to do this in Chicago. We partnered with Mayor Daley, the City of Chicago, and the Field Museum, but it became a reason to have a citywide conversation. So we got 85 corporate sponsors, everyone from Abbott Pharmaceuticals and Goldman Sachs and Walgreens and McDonald's, major brands, and we partnered with the Chicago Public Schools, got curriculum into every 6th grade classroom, which was no easy feat to do. We also partnered with Starbucks, who we printed 300,000 copies of a guidebook, which showed each globe, but then it talked about the solution that the globe presented. So those were distributed free throughout Chicagoland. I had moms come up to me in the grocery store saying, little Johnny was so excited to bring his Cool Globes guidebook to show and tell. I'd walked into other schools for my kid's basketball game or something, and in the glass window would say, little paper mache globes that said Cool Globes, hot ideas for a cooler planet, which was our tagline. And to see that, in schools an hour outside of Chicago was really great to just see the ripple effect of, starting that conversation and then having other people join in.
I love how you met people where they were at with that project. Obviously, this is a moment of eroding trust in our institutions, ranging from government, even education. What role can museums play in educating people on climate change? Start with you, Lori.
So I think, first off, I really appreciated what the governor said, right? Pollution, climate change. Pollution, I think, is important for us to think about because it impacts biodiversity, right? As well as, we see what's happening with wildfires and the climate, but the two are linked. And I think one of the things that we can do to bring to this is to help people understand biodiversity. What is it? For natural history museums, the dioramas that we have across the way were put in place there for conservation goals. And they actually did achieve, despite the fact that they went out and killed a bunch of animals to put in there, they did actually generate a whole system of thinking about conservation in far-off places. For us, having those beautiful diorama halls at NHM, we took the next step of creating space in what was a parking lot, a nature garden. So we have a beautiful nature garden with sustainable, local, climate-appropriate plants. You go in that nature garden today, you would never have imagined it was a parking lot. And we have an LA Nature Lab. So we're helping bring people into the conversation about biodiversity, LA's biodiversity, and a healthier community, a healthier place to live, because we know nature and health go together. But many of our communities in LA don't have exposure to nature. We have a lot of children in LA who've never been to the beach. And so grounding in a place in South LA where we can actually have children and their families in the garden thinking about why those plants are there, what critters are coming to be in that space, how we repopulated nature in that area is one of the key things that we can do. There are lots of other things we do, but certainly our urban nature research work and our community science programs are very much about that connection to biodiversity and what the impact of pollution is. It's really about what the hope is for the future and what your backyards, your parks, your neighborhoods can look like.
Sean?
And to build on what Lori is describing, I think that natural history museums are places where we can bring evidence to our visitors, to students, to educators about nature, about the world. And it's a place to engage in actual objects. It's a place to engage in data and information in a real, direct, hands-on way. And I think that's critical because the more people can have an understanding about the process of scientific thinking, the process of interpreting what's going on around them, to experience this directly in a hands-on way by engaging in activities or interacting with objects or specimens in the museum, the more that actually makes the reality of the changes that are going on in the world around us in terms of biodiversity loss, in terms of the impact of climate, sort of real and tangible. And that connection or the need to take things from being abstract and put them into a very specific context, and often a local context, I think is important, not only because I think that's the thing that resonates with people and that can actually move people, but it actually becomes something that's much harder to attack or to undermine in some way. That the more that things stay on a really high, distant level, the easier it is for someone to raise uninformed questions about it. The more that it draws from something where you're asking people to connect their own experiences to scientific ideas that they're engaging in the museum, and building that connection between how they see the world, evidence around them, that actually creates a link that's much harder to undermine and from outside perspectives.
I'm hearing you echo what Governor Schwarzenegger said. This is not, we have to move beyond the polar bears and the icebergs, right? We have to talk about what's happening in our own communities. Wendy, I'd like to modify this question a little bit for you and maybe ask about the role art might have in this, role art education might have in supporting our students and learning about climate change.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people ask me, oh, you have an art background. And I was like, no, I'm a climate activist. I just chose art because I think it's accessible and it's non-threatening. And I think too often we present this as, again, something that's daunting, and it was a way that, again, just to bring people in the fold who were maybe resistant to doing that. But again, I think it's kind of putting the medicine in the sugar, right? It's a way to educate people without them knowing them being educated. It's kind of like they're just curious to stumble upon something. And, the symbolism with cool globes was that the globes were so big that you had to stop and confront it. And, climate change is so big that we have to stop and confront it. But also the symbolism is that each globe was presented a solution, right? That we had 1,200 submissions for artwork, and the ones that were accepted were specifically solutions-based. So,
well, something I'm hearing everybody say is that beauty has a really important role here, and we haven't talked about that much, but I'm also reflecting on the governor's words about doom and gloom, and it seems like you're each creating a different narrative to that. Would you agree? Anyone?
Is so important. And I think we're all trying to inspire that, because we know that that is what makes people act. I tell everyone one of my favorite books is Awe, The Science of Everyday Wonder by Dr. Keltner. And he actually has the scientific basis for why the work that we do, and the chance to just have that awesome moment, actually makes people think about their place and what they can do in their agency.
And, and I I also think that there's something powerful about the combination of art and science, the humanities and science, to be able to effectively move both heart and mind of people to motivate about so committing themselves to change, activating people to move forward. It's interesting, we've had two events at the museum over the course of the past year and a half or so. One aimed at connecting performance to topics of climate change, and it was a collaboration with a theater group called Theater of War, which does classical theater interpreted by professional actors, but then with community-led conversations. And so we were approached by Theater of War about doing a reading of Oedipus and connecting it to a community conversation on climate change. I had not read Oedipus since like 9th grade, so initially I was kind of a bit confused. But if you think about it, it's a play that really quite beautifully talks about ways in which the world is changing around people they don't quite understand, and also the ways in which governmental authority, in this case Oedipus, is rejecting the opinions of the wise people around him because he thinks he actually knows the answer and his advisors don't. And so we had the reading of the play, and high school students responded to very quickly make the connections about what does this mean about authority? What does this mean about the ways in which one should take individual action and responsibility with respect to community, and how does that compare to community action? So I think there's something about arts and humanities that give a space for conversation and exploration about these topics, and finding ways in museums as places that can convene and bring people together, I think is really exciting.
It's probably no surprise that Sean and I are both from presidencies of liberal arts colleges before going to the museum world. So we see that, intersectionality. And I just want to say that one of the things that we still have right now is a beautiful exhibition called Reframing Dioramas, which is an intersection between art and science. And it really is the story of diorama making. We don't actually kill animals anymore, but there is a history to that, and actually the aesthetics of diorama making, and then looking and connecting that to our environment and what's happening in our environment through that exhibition. It's really beautiful. We have 3 artist interventions in what were classic diorama bays. And it was part of the Pacific Standard Time Art and Science Collide by the Getty.
I'm hearing so much more about the art connection than I thought I would today. It's really exciting. How about you, Wendy? Do you have any other examples? Because when I heard Sean talk about Oedipus, I could feel the room in that moment say, oh, a concrete example of what we can do. Do you have any examples that you have seen in the museum context that have really made an impact on you when it comes to making the connection between climate change and our world right now?
Wow, there's many, so it's hard to pinpoint one, but I think again, I think that having the space to react to something, I think it's particularly helpful when things are interactive, when there's something you can touch, you can feel, you can see. I think one of the problems with climate change is that it's not, it does feel distant because you don't touch it, feel it, see it. Now, I do think a lot of that is communications. We need to talk about our crops are more expensive because of droughts and floods, and and cotton and clothing and everything is impacted. Our real estate's more expensive, mortgages. So I think we need to connect things, and I think obviously having museum exhibitions where you can kind of see it, touch it, or feel it does that. But I also go beyond that in terms of, because I think there's a lot of people in this room who aren't necessarily in the museum space, but are in communications and education. And I think, it's been said before, let's stop talking about 2 degrees. I asked the head of NOAA, the science director at NOAA, what happens at 3 degrees that doesn't happen at 2 degrees? And her answer to me was, it goes from really, really bad to really, really worse. But it wasn't articulated. And I'm thinking, if you can't articulate that, then that's why you've got 40%. People don't understand what that means. And so let's put it in terms of, like, I used to joke 20 years ago, but I didn't think it was true. Like, if people connected their flight delays to climate change, they'd be really pissed off and maybe do something about it. And we need to put this in terms that people can relate to, here now.
What word? Oh, yeah, please.
Oh, I was going to add on to that. It is interesting thinking in New York where one of the sort of direct impacts of climate change that many people feel in the city is that there are neighborhoods where basements flood now and they didn't flood, ever really before. And, if we think of the conversations or the ways that spins out, there are parts of the city where finding expertise for basement sump pumps is a real challenge because it was never an issue before. So, beginning to get people to make that links of, there are these things that are happening and they're directly experiencing it and they fit into this broader context kind of really helps with that connection of local, global.
Can I just say, I was just going to say that's one of the reasons we supported a program with you at Annenberg and with Aspen, because I think that the communications is so key. Like, we could talk about basements flooding, but we need to use the words climate change, right? We have every night I'm watching the news about some extreme weather event that's a record breaking. And I just want to say to the meteorologists or the news and use the words climate change. This is a result of climate change, because people particularly in red state America or depending on which media you watch, oh, climate change is a hoax, but geez, this weather's really weird. And they will be the first to say, oh yeah, there's not as many trout in my river. They're in touch with the land and see the changes. They just don't use the same language. And so I think that's closing the narrative gap and closing the language gap is a key.
Partly I think one of the challenges we have is that people think about climate change, they think about weather, right? But they also have heard that climate has changed through the history of this planet. So it's always changed, right? So I think the real issue is they don't understand the rate of change. And so really putting a pin in the rate of change is, talking to, and children aren't going to necessarily see it, but their parents have seen the changes in their local environment, right? So if you can draw them into this, what is your experience of seeing more hotter days? Governor Schwarzenegger said, fire year. It's not fire season. And we know that's changed. Fire's been a part of LA's history for 13,000 years. That's another topic, La Brea tar pits. I'm happy to engage with anybody on that. But look at, Octavia Butler wrote about it in 1993, Parable of the Sower. It's here, and now it's in LA, and it's very easy to talk about preparation for this, but it's also the simple fact that those winds were really powerful. And that's climate change, and it's the rate of change that we have to be thinking about. A 4-fold increase in the last 20 years in wildfires in the West. That's real. So we have to help people understand rate.
Yeah, I liked the phrase that Dean Bay used when she was talking to Governor Schwarzenegger. She called the fires a climate-accelerated disaster, and I think that that's a point of confusion for a lot of people. I know I received personally some hate mail during the fire saying, "Lady, this is not caused by climate change. Surely it's a confluence of issues." I responded, "This is a climate-amplified disaster," and I think it's some of those complexities that make this so very challenging. Were you about to say something, Sean?
Oh, just that I also think at the same time, it's important for us to help to communicate the impact of mitigations that we can have. And one important one that I think sometimes is hard for folks to wrap their heads around, but it's a really easy visualization, is the impact of trees. And if you do a map of any city of temperature and where are the hottest areas during peak temperature times and where are the trees or where are the trees missing, right? And those things which can help from a data-driven way drive home the connections between rising temperature, concrete things we can do as individuals, as cities on a local level, and actually what that also means socioeconomically in terms of communities that suffer the most in terms of the impact on health and other things in life, that those are also data-driven things that are very local, that sometimes when you show the data, the switch goes on to folks and it's like, that makes sense for us to do.
Our trees actually went viral in Los Angeles. I don't know if any of you saw this recently. It was pretty great. Our USC Public Exchange Program has been working on a tree research project, and they got lots of traction last week when we found that our trees in Los Angeles are doing more work than we even thought. It's always nice to hear some good news. Lori?
I was just going to say those non-native palm trees don't give a lot of shade in LA, do they? So the ones that are giving shade are really important, and we do have a shade deficit in LA.
That's right. We talk a lot about shade equity too, and what you mentioned, Sean, and that shade is not equal across this city and others as well. So I'm looking at the time, and I want to ask each of you the same question that Dean Bay asked Governor Schwarzenegger. I think it's an impossible question, but he gave the best answer. We have to terminate pollution. So tell me what motivates you to act on climate change. Can I start with you, Wendy?
I was going to say, originally it was my 4 children, and now I can say it's my granddaughter.
Likewise, it's my grandson.
I'm going to stick with the theme, my kids.
Yeah, there's research that says that that's the number one motivator for people over a certain age, is certainly their families. I want to thank each of you for being here today and for your insights on the ways that educators and museums can work together. And Laura, do you have something you want to say next?
So thank you all. You can get a picture. I'm going to just talk on the side. Thank you all so much for an exciting morning already. We're going to go into our breakout sessions right now. Go to the next slide. So where you're going to be able to go is Annenberg Plaza, where several of you have breakfast. There will be some food there that you can grab. And then the room 106 is right next to Annenberg Plaza for those people that are going to the gaming session. And if you're going to walk over to the museum, meet in Annenberg Plaza, and you can walk to the museum from there. So thank you all.